They weren't just toys. They were witnesses to fear, to obsession, to death. From eBay auctions to locked museum cases, these dolls were never meant to move. And yet, they did. Tonight we follow 3 objects that were supposed to be silent, but somehow they never stopped whispering. Case 1. Harold the Doll. The first haunted doll ever sold online. In 2003, a strange listing appeared on eBay. It was for an old porcelain doll, cracked, discolored, with lifeless black eyes and a crooked smile. The seller claimed the doll had brought illness, nightmares, and death into his life. He didn't want money. He just wanted it gone. He wrote that he had purchased the doll from a flea market in upstate New York. The man selling it, an elderly vendor, had begged him not to take it. He said the doll had once belonged to a child who died under tragic circumstances, and ever since misfortune followed anyone who kept it. But the buyer ignored the warnings. He brought the doll home, and soon everything began to fall apart. His cat died without explanation. His girlfriend left him. He began having nosebleeds, headaches, and constant nightmares. At night, he swore he heard footsteps, whispers, and soft knocks coming from the room where the doll sat. He tried to throw it away, but every time something stopped him, so instead he posted it online. Haunted Doll. Causes nightmares and death, the title read. The internet exploded. Some laughed, others dared each other to bid. Forums filled with memes and challenges. Most people thought it was a joke, but not everyone was laughing. One of the bidders was a man named Anthony Quinata, a paranormal investigator and writer. He had seen hoaxes before. He wasn't quick to believe in curses, but something about this doll felt different. He placed a bid, and he won. When Harold arrived, Anthony felt nothing at first. The doll was silent, still, unmoving. But his dog wouldn't stop barking at it. The lights in his house flickered for no reason, and he began having dreams, dark, vivid, and disturbing. In one of them, a child stood in the corner of his room, unmoving, face hidden. In another, he heard a voice, low, mechanical, almost human. It said, "Let me out." He woke up drenched in sweat. Curious and cautious, Anthony placed a voice recorder near the doll and left it running overnight. The next morning, he played it back. For hours, there was silence. Then, a groan. Low, almost mechanical. And then, unmistakably, 3 chilling words. "Let me out!" There was no one else in the room. No TV, no radio, no explanation. Anthony replayed the audio over and over. The waveform was real. The voice was there. Still, he didn't get rid of the doll. Instead, he began documenting it. He launched a website, wrote blog posts, and started collecting reports from others who had encountered Harold. What started as one man's strange experience began to grow into something much larger. Anthony wasn't some wide-eyed thrill-seeker. He had served as a counselor, hosted a radio show on the paranormal, and worked with multiple investigators on hauntings across the country. He was methodical, careful, sober, and yet Harold changed him. He stopped going out. Friends said he became withdrawn, paranoid. He placed salt lines across doorways and covered mirrors in his home. He kept Harold in a case, but even then he refused to turn his back on it. In one blog entry, he described sitting in his office and watching the doll's hand slowly shift to the right over the course of 3 hours. He took pictures, set up a camera, captured nothing out of the ordinary. But the hand had moved. One woman, after touching the glass case that held Harold, developed sudden vertigo and fell unconscious. EMTs were called. She recovered, but said she remembered nothing except for a faint voice saying, "You're not allowed." Another man reportedly challenged the doll aloud, daring it to do something. He laughed, took photos, and left. 2 days later, he suffered a sudden seizure while driving. He survived the crash but never regained full memory of that day. His dashcam footage was corrupted, glitched into unreadable static. Over time, Anthony stopped letting people near Harold. The doll was no longer a curiosity. It was a problem. He brought in a priest, then another, then a third. Each one left unsettled. One priest refused to even enter the room, standing at the threshold and whispering prayers from a distance. Another left in the middle of the night without saying goodbye. The third offered a warning. This isn't a soul asking for peace. This is something pretending to be one. By now, Harold had become known as the most dangerous haunted object in private hands. People began reporting strange phenomena after simply viewing his image online. Some claimed their devices froze when they tried to download his picture. Others said they heard faint breathing while reading about him. One woman in Texas emailed Anthony pleading for help. After printing out a photo of Harold for a school project, she began experiencing violent sleep paralysis. She saw a figure at the end of her bed, always in shadow, always watching. When she tried to burn the photo, her printer caught fire. Anthony told her only one thing: don't speak to it, don't acknowledge it, forget its name. And yet forgetting Harold is almost impossible. He is part of the internet now. Unlike Annabelle or Robert, Harold didn't sit behind museum glass or ride the wave of a Hollywood script. He grew through chat rooms, eBay listings, Reddit threads, and YouTube comments. He's digital, viral, alive in pixels and code, and that makes him feel closer. Harder to contain. Anthony eventually stopped updating his site. His interviews became rare. When asked in one of his final appearances if he still believed Harold was haunted, he answered simply, "No, I think it's worse than that." In 2021, Anthony Quinata passed away. There was no drama, no strange final message, just silence. But to those who followed Harold's story for nearly 2 decades, the ending felt deliberate, as if Harold had chosen the moment. Today, no one knows exactly where Harold is. Some say he's in storage. Others say he was buried in a remote location. A few believe he's still active and still listening. One thing's certain: no one is laughing anymore. People who have met Harold in person all say the same thing. He doesn't move. He waits. He doesn't scream, doesn't run, doesn't chase. He just exists, watching, listening, waiting for the next person to underestimate him. In the world of haunted dolls, Harold is different. He doesn't want attention. He wants belief. And maybe, just maybe, he wants someone to let him out. Case 2. Robert the Doll. It was 1904 in Key West, Florida, when a young boy named Robert Eugene Otto was given a gift that would shadow his life until the day he died. The gift was a doll, 3 feet tall, stuffed with wood wool, dressed in a sailor's uniform with tiny black buttons for eyes and a smirk stitched permanently onto its face. It came from the Bahamas, handcrafted by a servant who worked for the Otto family. The doll's origins were never officially documented, but the woman who gave it to Eugene was said to practice an old form of voodoo. At first, it was just a toy. Eugene named it after himself, Robert, and spoke to it as if it were a friend. His parents would hear him whispering to the doll late into the night. Sometimes there was silence before a second voice answered back, a voice that didn't belong to the child, a voice that was too deep, too cold. They dismissed it as imagination, until objects in the house began to move on their own. Silverware thrown from drawers, furniture tipped over, portraits slashed with a blade, and every time something happened, Eugene had only one answer: Robert did it. It became a family phrase, a warning, a curse. Robert did it. The doll was moved to the attic for a time, locked behind a door hidden from view, but Eugene wouldn't leave it alone. He would sneak up, sit beside the doll for hours, speaking in low tones. His behavior changed. He became withdrawn, erratic, quick to anger, as if something had taken hold of him and refused to let go. Neighbors claimed they saw the doll moving from window to window when no one was home. A delivery boy said the doll blinked at him through the glass. Others claimed they heard footsteps upstairs pacing back and forth while Eugene was at school. Years passed. Eugene grew up. He left home. He studied art in Paris. He became a painter, a husband, a man of standing in his community. And then he returned to the house. Now married, he brought his wife Ann with him and insisted on one thing: that Robert be given his own room. Not the attic, Not storage, a room with windows, sunlight, furniture like a person, Ann objected. She didn't want the doll in the house. She said it made her uncomfortable, that she felt watched, that its expression seemed to shift when she wasn't looking. But Eugene insisted. Robert stayed. The marriage began to deteriorate. Eugene became obsessed with the doll again. He spoke to it, painted with it in the room, even set a place for it at the dinner table. When Ann protested, Eugene would fly into rages uncharacteristic violent, filled with strange phrases that weren't like him. Sometimes at night, Ann would wake to find Robert sitting at the foot of their bed. Neither of them had put him there. Visitors to the home described hearing giggles when no one else was present. Cameras malfunctioned. Cold spots moved through the hallways. And always Robert sat in his chair, silent still, watching. As Eugene aged, his health declined. His artwork grew darker, more frantic. His final pieces often featured the doll tall looming with blank eyes and twisted limbs. When Eugene died in 1974, Ann was left alone in the house. She locked Robert in the attic again. Some say she would hear him walking at night, pacing angrily across the floorboards. She refused to enter the room. She died within 2 years. The house was sold. The new owners found Robert in the attic and donated him to the Fort East Martello Museum, just a few miles away. He remains there to this day, sealed in a glass case under constant supervision. But the story doesn't end there. Visitors to the museum often report strange experiences after seeing the doll. Some claim to feel lightheaded. Others hear soft tapping on the glass. A few have watched the doll's facial expression change in real time from neutral to angry to blank once more. But the most chilling stories come from those who break the rules. There's a sign beside Robert's case. Please ask permission before taking photos. It sounds like folklore, theater, a tourist trap. But those who snap a photo without asking often regret it. The museum keeps a binder, hundreds of letters from people who claim their lives fell apart after disrespecting the doll. Some write to apologize, others beg for forgiveness. One man said his camera shattered 2 days after visiting. A woman said her husband was hospitalized the night she returned home. Accidents, illness, divorce, fires, lost jobs, broken bones, and all of them say the same thing. It started after Robert. What makes Robert the doll so unsettling isn't just the rumors or the letters. It's the quiet consistency. The way stories line up across decades, across cities, across strangers who never met. The doll has never left Florida, but the effects people say follow them home. A museum employee once shared a story about a tourist who joked loudly in front of Robert's case, calling him ugly and overrated. He then took a photo without asking. Within 24 hours, the man called the museum in a panic. His rental car had broken down. His luggage had been lost. He had been locked out of his hotel room with no ID and no shoes. The next day, his flight was canceled due to weather only his. Other flights left on time. He sent an apology letter with a printed photo of Robert circled in red ink, writing the words, "I'm sorry. Please stop." Another account came from a school teacher who visited the museum during a vacation. She took a photo and posted it online, tagging it with laughing emojis. A week later, she broke her wrist slipping on dry concrete. Her phone screen shattered mysteriously during the fall. Only the photo of Robert remained untouched. Some visitors claim they felt their emotions change after looking into his eyes. They describe waves of sadness, paranoia, dread. Others say they began dreaming of the doll standing at the end of their beds, never moving, never speaking, but always watching. One former curator at the museum left after just 7 months. She refused to give interviews, but her resignation note, reportedly filed quietly, included a single sentence. There's something in that case that doesn't want to stay in it. The museum has since taken extra precautions, installing motion sensors, temperature monitors, and glass thick enough to stop a bullet. But it's not about keeping people out. It's about keeping something in. Robert is more than a story passed down through time. He's more than a tourist attraction. He is, in every sense of the word, an artifact of fear. And that fear is quiet, subtle, patient. He doesn't chase. He doesn't speak. He doesn't jump out. He waits. He waits for people to stop believing, to stop asking for permission, to treat him like just another stuffed toy in a box of forgotten things. And when they do, he reminds them. In the early 2000s, a group of amateur ghost hunters visited the museum after hours for a private session. They brought cameras, microphones, EMF detectors. They weren't serious investigators. They were thrill seekers. During the session, one of them knocked on Robert's case and said, "Come out and play." Their footage was never released, because none of it saved. Every file from that night was corrupted. 2 weeks later, the man who made the comment was hospitalized with acute liver failure. No history, no symptoms, no diagnosis. The rest of the group deleted their channel and disappeared from public view. Stories like this keep piling up not on websites or YouTube, but in handwritten letters, phone calls to the museum, and quiet confessions from people who can't sleep anymore. A firefighter once visited Robert on a dare from his crew. He said he wasn't afraid of dolls. He stared into Robert's eyes for a full minute. The next morning, he found a deep scratch across his left shoulder. No blood, no pain, just a mark perfectly straight. It faded in 2 days, but he never spoke of Robert again. The doll sits behind glass, unmoving. But those who know, those who've been affected, they say he doesn't need to move. He's already inside your head. And he's been there since the moment you heard his name. Before his death, Eugene Otto was no longer the man people remembered. He rarely left his studio. He spoke less and less to real people and more to the doll that sat in its own chair near the window. Neighbors who dropped by claimed the house always felt colder than it should have been. The walls, they said, seemed to lean in slightly like something inside wanted to listen. And his wife stopped inviting guests. She told a friend once in confidence that she no longer felt married, that Eugene only truly smiled when he was near the doll, that she heard him laughing late at night even when he was alone, and that sometimes she heard a second laugh. Not Eugene's. She reportedly tried to get rid of Robert twice, once by locking him in the cellar, once by giving him to a church. Both times the doll returned. The second time it appeared on their porch. No note, no explanation, just sitting upright, spotless, facing the front door. Anne began sleeping in a separate room. She died 2 years after Eugene alone in that house. The cause of death listed as heart failure. But the coroner noted something strange, her expression. Frozen in what he described as wide-eyed shock. Her hands were clenched. Her back arched as if she had tried to scream but never made a sound. Robert was found seated in the hallway outside her room. Since then, no one has dared keep the doll privately. The museum took him in not because they wanted to, but because they didn't know what else to do. A curse passed along like an object nobody wanted to touch, and yet thousands do. Every year tourists come to see Robert, some out of curiosity, some out of defiance. A few come just to apologize. And in every photo he looks the same. Until he doesn't. Look long enough and some say his eyes follow you. His mouth curls slightly. His tiny stitched fingers twitch in the corners of your vision. Maybe it's the lighting. Maybe it's the legend. Or maybe it's something else. He was never just a doll. He was never just a toy. He was a mirror, reflecting whatever you brought with you. And if what you brought was disrespect, he remembers. Even now, over a century later, Robert sits in his case, quiet and unmoving. But those who've looked into his face say one thing with certainty. He's still listening. And he's still waiting. Case 3. Annabelle. Most people think they know the story of Annabelle. They've seen the movies. The porcelain doll with wide glass eyes, cracked cheeks, and a smirk that never changes. They've watched it sit in shadows, summon demons, and unleash death with a stare. But the truth is quieter. The real Annabelle was never porcelain. She wasn't designed to frighten. She looked ordinary sweet even, a soft-bodied Raggedy Ann doll with red yarn hair and a painted smile. But according to those who met her, that smile was never meant to last. The story begins in 1970 in Hartford, Connecticut. A nursing student named Donna received the doll as a birthday gift from her mother. It was second-hand, purchased from a local antique store. There was no warning, no strange aura, just a simple gesture from a mother to her daughter. Donna brought the doll home to the apartment she shared with her roommate, Angie. They placed it in the living room on the couch beside the record player. At first, it was just decoration, but then it started moving. Nothing dramatic, nothing cinematic, just subtle. They'd find it seated on the floor instead of the couch, arms crossed in a new way, head tilted left instead of right. They laughed it off, told themselves they were imagining things. But the changes grew bolder. Donna once left the doll in the bedroom. Hours later, it was sitting in the kitchen upright in a chair. Then came the notes. Tiny scraps of parchment, old paper, not from anything they owned. On them were scrawled messages in shaky handwriting. Help me. Help Lou. Help us. None of them had any idea who Lou was. Then one day, Angie came home to find the doll standing in the hallway, leaning against the wall. It wasn't capable of standing on its own. That night, they heard rustling. Not from the wind, from inside the apartment. They searched every room. The doll was lying face down in the middle of the hallway. No one had touched it. That was when Lou spoke up. Lou was Angie's boyfriend. He never liked the doll, said it made him uneasy, that something about it felt wrong. He began having nightmares, violent dreams of the doll climbing onto his chest, trying to choke him. One night, Lou woke up gasping, drenched in sweat with claw-like marks across his torso. Scratches, fresh, bleeding. No one else was home. The three of them decided it was time to get help. They contacted a local medium who agreed to visit the apartment. During a seance, she claimed the spirit of a young girl had attached itself to the doll. Her name, the medium said, was Annabelle Higgins. She had died nearby tragically, violently. Her spirit, lost and afraid, had latched onto the doll. All she wanted was to be loved, to be taken care of. Donna and Angie moved. By sympathy, gave the spirit permission to stay. That was their mistake. After that night, the activity intensified. Doors opened and slammed shut. Books flew from shelves. The air turned cold in the middle of the night, and a foul smell lingered for hours. Lou said he heard growling from empty rooms. Once he entered the living room to find the doll standing on the table, its head turned toward him, its arms raised. He didn't sleep that night. Finally, out of desperation, they contacted a priest. The priest referred them to two names they'd never heard before, Ed and Lorraine Warren, demonologists. The Warrens arrived a week later. They didn't see a ghost. They saw a deception. According to Ed Warren, there was no little girl named Annabelle Higgins. That story, he said, was bait a lie told by something darker to gain their trust. A spirit can't inhabit a doll, but a demon can manipulate one, use it as a conduit. The doll, they said, wasn't haunted. It was cursed. They believed a demonic entity had used the doll as a vessel to get closer to the occupants. The end goal was possession not of the doll, but of a human soul. Lou, they feared, had been the primary target. The Warrens took the doll. They didn't burn it. They didn't destroy it. Instead, they sealed it in a glass case surrounded by prayers and protective symbols. It now resides in the Warren Occult Museum in Monroe, Connecticut. A handwritten sign beneath it reads, "Warning, positively do not open." But that didn't stop people from trying. Over the years, visitors mocked the doll, tapped on the glass, laughed at the story. One man reportedly dared it to prove it was real. He died hours later in a motorcycle crash. His girlfriend survived. She said he had been joking about the doll just before the accident. Another visitor claimed to have touched the glass. That night, he suffered a near-fatal heart attack. He wrote a letter to the Warrens from his hospital bed, begging for forgiveness. Staff at the museum say the doll has changed positions inside its case. Sometimes its hands shift, its head turns slightly, its expression darkens. Photos taken without permission often come out distorted, blurred, or sometimes completely black. People who scoff at the idea of haunted dolls find themselves writing letters weeks later, letters filled with apologies, with fear. The doll never moves. But it never needs to, because once you believe that's all it takes. Even Lorraine Warren, who stood beside it for decades, refused to look directly into its eyes. She once said it's not the doll that's evil, it's what works through it. Unlike Robert or Harold, Annabelle doesn't demand attention. She waits. She waits for doubt. She waits for cruelty. She waits for disbelief. And then when you least expect it, she reminds you she was never just a doll. She was a doorway, a warning dressed in innocence. And for those who didn't listen, the cost was always the same. Regret. She sits now in a locked room behind blessed glass, beneath cameras and alarms and motion sensors. But every so often, the alarms go off, with no one in the room. No movement, no temperature change, no wind. Just an alert. And the doll, still sitting exactly where she was. Still smiling. Still waiting. The Warrens never underestimated what Annabelle was capable of. Every time Ed handled the case, he would wear a pair of blessed gloves. He never let anyone touch the glass. No visitors, no clergy, not even close friends. Lorraine would burn sage outside the display cabinet once a month. Even with all the precautions, they claimed the energy in the room changed when people spoke the doll's name too many times. One summer afternoon, a young priest came to visit the museum. He was skeptical, smiling, confident, dismissive. When he saw Annabelle, he tapped the glass and said aloud, "God is stronger than anything inside you." Ed immediately pulled him aside. He warned the priest not to mock what he didn't understand. On the way home, the priest's brakes failed. His car swerved off the road and nearly flipped. He survived, but he never returned. A year later, he sent a sealed envelope to the Warrens. It contained a single line. "You were right." Another story comes from a teenage girl who visited with her boyfriend. She dared him to insult the doll. He did, laughing, pretending to cry, asking Annabelle to come get him. That night, he woke screaming. Deep scratches covered his back. His bed sheets were torn. No one else was home. He moved out of his parents' house within a week. He never spoke of the doll again. Some believe the doll's influence is psychological, a manifestation of guilt and fear, that those who disrespect it carry anxiety with them, and that anxiety feeds the consequences. But others say it's something much older, something that doesn't need belief to work, because Annabelle has never acted like a ghost. She doesn't rattle chains, doesn't cry, doesn't speak. She watches, and then she waits. A museum staff member once stayed late to finish inventory. As she walked past the display room, she heard something tap the glass. Light, repetitive, like fingernails. She stopped, looked through the security window. No one was inside. And yet, when she checked the footage the next day, she saw something that made her quit. The doll's head moved. Not sharply, not suddenly, just slightly. Enough to suggest intention. The motion sensors hadn't triggered, but something had shifted. Ed Warren once said that the most dangerous thing about Annabelle wasn't what she did, it was what she wanted to be allowed to do. That every time someone questioned her story, it loosened something. A crack, a thread, a door. She didn't want your fear. She wanted your permission. Today, the Warren Occult Museum is closed to the public. Legal issues, safety concerns, and community pressure forced it to shut down. But Annabelle remains sealed in that case, protected, contained, feared. Occasionally, people try to find out where she is now. Rumors spread online. Some say she was moved to a church basement. Others say she was buried with salt. A few believe she escaped when the glass cracked during a minor earthquake. The Warrens' family denies it, but they also won't confirm where she is. And maybe that's intentional. Maybe it's better that we don't know. Because even a photo of her, even an old one, has been enough to start a chain of events people couldn't explain. A museum intern once printed a picture of Annabelle for a school project. She didn't believe in the story. She thought it was a fun horror theme. That night her printer caught fire. No fault. No paper jam. Just spontaneous ignition. The photo was never recovered. And in the years since, the girl says she sometimes wakes up to the feeling of being watched. always on the nights when she dreams about red yarn hair and painted eyes. She never speaks the doll's name out loud anymore. Annabelle is not the most violent case in the Warrens' archives. She's not the bloodiest, not the most dramatic, but she's the one they feared the most, because she never needed to chase anyone. They came to her, and sometimes they didn't leave the same. What makes her story truly terrifying isn't the legend. It's the silence, the unspoken consequence, the idea that something small, something soft, could carry something ancient, and that it doesn't care whether you believe, only whether you invite it in, because it only needs a moment, a word, a touch, a laugh at the wrong time, and then it follows. That's why Ed and Lorraine never treated Annabelle like an artifact. They treated her like an active threat, not a haunted doll, a possessed object, a doorway, a warning, and even now sealed in glass, surrounded by prayers and protection. She waits for someone to stop believing so she can remind them. She never needed legs to walk. She only needed one mistake. Some dolls are made to comfort. These were made to be forgotten. But someone always opens the box. Someone always looks too long. And when they do, the story begins again. Subscribe for more true stories that stay with you long after the road ends.